time I leave work in the morning, we'll just go look, I'll make it look this time. We want to park fix that way.
All right. Fantastic. It's 1 o'clock and we have quorum, so that's a good way to start the day. I would like to welcome everybody and approval agenda. To approve the agenda. So I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So move.
Second?
I second.
Second, fantastic. So Hannah gets to do the first roll call of the day. That was quick, wasn't it? Sorry.
I'm just trying to grow people. I don't know if Kim can talk yet, but.
Okay.
Asheville Kimroni,
Aye.
Black Mountain Archie Pertiller,
Aye.
Flat Rock Ann Coletta,
Aye.
Fletcher Bob Davy,
Aye.
Haywood County Kevin Ensley,
Aye.
Henderson County Bill Lapsley,
Aye. Aye.
Laurel Park George Banta,
Aye.
Madison County Matt Wetzel,
Aye.
Maggie Valley Mike Eveland,
Aye.
Mills River Shannon Daunt,
Aye.
Montreat Tom Widmer,
Aye.
Urban Transit Brandon Rogers,
Aye.
Gainesville Anthony Sutton,
Aye.
Weaverville Catherine Cordell. Aye. Is there anybody that I missed?
Jen Hensley, the city of Hendersonville.
Oh, sorry, Jen. Jen Hensley, Hendersonville.
Aye.
Your eyes have it.
Fantastic, thank you. I'd like to take this moment. I saw Archie's on in the meeting. This is his first meeting, so I'd like to welcome Archie. He's from Black Mountain. Is there anything you'd like to tell the group, Archie?
Not at this time, in the learning process, but I appreciate it. Thank you.
Fantastic. I know that we have a training class on March the 3rd for new members. So everyone's invited. New members and old members are invited. You need to get a refresher. Next, I'll read the ethics statement. In accordance with the State Government Ethics Act, it is the duty of every board member to avoid conflicts of interest. Does any board member have any known conflict of interest with respect to any matters coming before the board today? If so, please identify the conflict and refrain from any participation in the particular matter involved. Do we have any conflicts today? Okay. Moving forward, is every public comment? Do we have anyone from the public for public comment? No? Wow. Okay. Next is the consent agenda. Has everyone had time to review the agenda?
Mr. Chair, I move that the consent agenda be approved as presented.
Fantastic. We have a first. Do we have a second?
I can second that.
Thank you. Okay, Hannah.
Asheville Kimroni,
Aye.
Black Mountain Archie Pertiller,
Aye.
Buncombe County Amanda Edwards,
Aye.
Flat Rock Ann Coletta,
Aye.
Fletcher Bob Davy,
Aye.
Haywood County Kevin Ensley,
Aye.
Henderson County Bill Lapsley,
Aye.
Hendersonville Jen Hensley,
Aye.
Laurel Park George Banta,
Aye.
Madison County Matt Wetzel,
Aye.
Maggie Valley Mike Eveland,
Aye.
Mills River Shannon Daunt,
Aye.
Montreat Tom Widmer,
Aye.
Urban Transit Brandon Rogers,
Aye.
Waynesville Anthony Sutton,
Aye.
and Weaverville Catherine Cordell. The ayes have it.
Fantastic. Moving on to the business section, we have board members' appointments to the prioritization subcommittee, and I'll turn that over to Tristan.
Sure. So for those of you who are unaware, the Prioritization Subcommittee is what we lovingly call the nitty-gritty subcommittee. It started as a subcommittee to deal with the prioritization process, also known as SPOT. It has since expanded to be in charge of the MPO's NCP and the locally administered projects program, as well as a number of other items within the MPO. So this is where we really get into the weeds on a lot of the items that later come to the TCC and board. The current bylaws for the subcommittee have 3 MPO board members and 4 TCC members or staff. But to note, all TCC board and NCDOT members are welcome to come join the conversation at the subcommittee. There are some people that, if you ask me enough nitty-gritty questions, I just add you to the mailing list. But this subcommittee does take votes on occasion. As of right now, we do have 1 vacancy for a board position that was filled by Larry Harris previously. So today we are hoping to fill that vacancy and have a full roster for our subcommittee. Which, fair warning, the compensation for this subcommittee has not kept up with inflation. We have quite a docket for it over the next year or 2.
I'd like to comment that it is a great place to learn what's going on with the MPO, so it's a great learning experience as well. But it does require some time and lots of reading and research. With that being said, do we have anyone nominated that would like to be nominated for the committee? Anyone show any interest in the committee?
Is it a monthly meeting?
Once a month. The meetings generally last 2 to 3 hours.
Generally, the last one was 20 minutes, which I think was a record. Don't be fooled.
This is Kim Roney from the city of Asheville. I've been attending those meetings in the past. I haven't been able to recently, but I could participate if that would be helpful.
Yes. Be helpful. Anybody else? We'll put it to a vote.
I'm new, but I would like to do that.
Archie, yep, which was from Town of Black Mountain. Okay, do we have any seconds for any of these individuals?
I'll second Archie.
Fantastic, we have a second for Archie. Okay, Hannah?
Okay. Does everybody know what they're voting on before I start?
Yes. We're voting to appoint Archie to the prioritization subcommittee.
Okay. Asheville, Kim Roney.
Aye.
Asheville, Maggie Ullman.
Aye.
Black Mountain, Archie Portiller.
I will vote for myself.
That's always a tough one.
Buncombe County, Amanda Edwards.
Aye.
Flat Rock, Ann Coletta.
Aye.
Chester, Bob Daisy.
Aye.
Greenwood County, Kevin Inslee.
Aye.
Henderson County, Bill Lapsley.
Aye.
Hendersonville, Jennifer Hensley.
Aye.
Laurel Park, George Banta.
Aye.
Madison County, Matt Wechsel.
Aye.
Maggie Valley, Mike Evelyn.
Aye.
Mills River, Shannon Gaunt.
Aye.
Montreat, Tom Widmer.
Aye.
Urban Transit, Brandon Rogers.
Aye.
Janesville, Anthony Sutton.
Aye.
And Weaverville, Catherine Cordell. Aye. The ayes have it.
Welcome, Archie. We appreciate you stepping up, and thank you, Kim, for also volunteering.
And Tristan, anyone can attend the prioritization subcommittee meetings, right?
Yeah, that's correct. Anyone on the CCC board or DOT can attend, and you're always welcome. The more the merrier for the conversation. So please attend as you see fit, and at the rare occasion that we vote, we have our voting members.
I would really encourage everyone to at least attend one of those meetings to see what goes on in the subcommittees. Okay. Next is the safety performance target.
Okay, so I talked about this last month as an informational item, but it's now a business item this time. So just a quick refresher, effective April 2016, the Federal Highway Administration established 5 highway safety performance measures, and that's in accord with regulations set forth by the Federal MAP 21 and FAST Act transportation funding bills. So they're looking at number of fatalities, rate of fatalities, number of serious injuries, rate of serious injuries, and number of combined non-motorized fatalities and non-motorized serious injuries. North Carolina state targets are set in agreement with Strategic Highway Safety Plan goals, and the goal of the most recent Strategic Highway Safety Plan is to reduce fatalities and serious injuries by half by 2030, moving towards 0 by 2050. So in this table, under the 5-year rolling averages column, you can see our targets for the 5-year average between 2016 and 2020, the furthest left column. And then in the center column, you can see our actual metrics, and then in the right column, you can see our baseline, which was our metrics from 2014 to 2018. So you can see our targets weren't achieved with our actual metrics, but a couple of them were better than our baseline. So fatalities and fatality rate were better than our 2014-2018 baseline. In the next table, you can see our performance metrics as 5-year averages over the last several years. And then the last row highlighted in red would be our 2023 targets that were recommended by the state. So the action this month is to consider a recommendation of safety performance targets, which the staff recommends that we adopt the targets defined by the state's methodology, but the other option would be to determine a different methodology to define our own targets. The reason we're not recommending that is because that would require the MPO to hire someone to monitor performance metrics constantly. So we basically be taking on more responsibility with no greater ability to influence action.
Thank you. Do we have any discussion on this item? Looks like Ann Coletta has her hand raised.
Yes, thank you. Ann Coletta, Village of Flat Rock. I just have one question. In looking at these numbers, these are absolute numbers in terms of an average. As the population in our area has increased, the percentages may be going down even though the numbers aren't meeting. So I just want to verify that what we're looking at in the chart are the absolute numbers, and that it is not reflective necessarily of a higher population. I just wonder about the percentages. Is our fatality at a lower percentage than it was in earlier years because of our increased population, or are we just looking at the straight numbers? If that makes sense.
So, Ann, in terms of the straight numbers, you see the fatalities and serious injuries and non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries. That's a 5-year average that they're looking at. In terms of the fatality rate and serious injury rate, that is averaged against, is it million vehicle miles traveled?
I think it's 100 million.
100 million vehicle miles traveled. So it's not adjusted for population, but it is adjusted for the amount of travel estimated to be taking place.
Okay, thank you.
This is Bob Davey. This is Bob Davey. Kind of on the flip side of that, if you look at over the time frame, particularly the last 5 years, the safety equipment in vehicles in terms of automatic braking and stuff has improved dramatically, but the numbers haven't gone down, so it may be worse than we think. Also, you know, I've been in a number of meetings where we talked about these target numbers and so on, but what does it really mean? I mean, what actions are ever taken after we set these numbers?
That's a fantastic question, Bob. We've talked at the prioritization work group at the state level about how we can better connect the planned investments and the investment decisions being made to the performance targets being adopted by the state and NPOs around the state. I will say that for the next round of prioritization, which as a reminder is starting later this year, there is likely not to be any real substantial change. And so I would say for the time being, the performance targets are largely informative, largely aspirational, and it's something we have to do as part of the regulations, but there's still a lot more work to do to connect that to investment decisions. I will say one thing I have requested as part of the prioritization work group is to try to at least take an informative look about how planned investments should impact these performance targets. So I think that's something that hopefully NCDOT can start publishing reports after they decide what projects are going to be chosen. But to Logan's point, as of right now, the issue with going our own way is that it doesn't change investment decisions.
Thank you.
More.
Tristan, Tom Widmer from Montreat. Kind of coming along Bob Davies' previous comments. You know, I don't have a lot of background in government. I have a lot of background in business. And if we were in business and trying to set targets that have not been achieved in 7 or 8 years, it just is not realistic. And I don't understand why we're doing it if they are not achievable. That's all.
Good question. That's a good point, Tom. Again, I would say it's largely for the aspirational nature of the performance measures, but that is something to be considered.
That being said, you also wouldn't, if you were in business, you wouldn't create more bureaucratic work for yourself that would cost more money for something that has no meaning.
And you wouldn't keep setting higher goals when you hadn't met the ones you already set.
Right, right. Any other discussion?
Just one more question, Ann Coletta again. In terms of when we don't meet these, there's no penalty that we suffer. We aren't not eligible for certain federal funds or state funds if we don't meet these targets. Is that right?
Correct. I think it would probably be an ugly circle if your safety performance was bad, so you lost safety funding.
Right.
So,
but it is the government. So.
Yeah, it is. I believe the regulations are that when organizations repeatedly don't meet their targets, they are required to look at and revise their safety plans. So I believe that's something that the state has done recently. There's no punitive penalty that the MPO would be facing, from what I've been told.
Thank you.
Anyone else that has questions or comments or?
Yeah, this is Bob Davey again. To me, the easiest thing that might actually see some actual change in these numbers is stepping up enforcement. And to do that, we've got to involve the town leaders, county leaders, the police departments, but it has to be a concerned effort. It can't just be a hand-waving exercise.
Correct, Bob. I also think once we get through some of our major construction on 26, that may be impactful to these numbers as well, since there's been an increase in that area. But I think Kim had a question as well.
Yes, thank you. Kim Roney, City of Asheville. So, Bob, I share your concerns about what are we doing afterwards to help us meet our targets? And I wonder if it might be time for us to look at putting local planning documents to address safety and invest in safe design speeds for roads. An example is that Asheville just passed our GAP plan to address accessibility and ADA compliance for safety. So if we were pointing to projects to get safer outcomes for all modes of transportation, that might help. It might also be a way for us as the MPO to pursue and invest in documents for the region to help get to some of those safety outcomes. And then a second thing I'm curious about is when we do have project changes, I think we need to be able to measure trends over a longer period of time. Because if we're just looking at numbers where they dip, say, for example, this year, are we looking at that depth of the severity of the crashes as well? And I think we won't be able to see those kinds of trends without giving enough time for staff to review what the trends and data are meaning for our communities in the region.
That is a 5-year rolling average, correct?
Correct. So you shouldn't have very big movements if it's a 5-year average, because you're only affecting about 20% of the statistics each year. So there should be small movements unless there's a major change. Right.
Yeah,
and I'd also know that. Oh, go ahead, Kim. Go ahead.
Well, I just wonder, is it possible, because we do have, at least for Asheville, we have a new document. Is it possible to get local planning documents that address safety pointed to in our report, so we do have another metric to come back and measure?
Potentially, but I would say that in terms of the investment decisions that the MPO does control, safety is, as of right now, the largest factor in how we determine the use of our local priorities. It's also a prominent factor in terms of the local priority point, or the locally administered projects that the funding that this board controls. So it's not that safety isn't being looked at. To be clear, it's more that these performance targets are not something that are directly linked. Another thing I think that might be helpful for this group is these performance targets are required to be looked at every 2 years. And there is coordination between NPO staff and DOT staff in the meantime. So we certainly can take some of this feedback to those discussions as the next round of targets are being developed.
Thank you.
I think to piggyback on, Kim had a great point in that this should be taken back to, since we're all elected officials for our jurisdictions, take this back to our jurisdictions and see what we can do in our own local government to help with these numbers. Any other discussion? This was 2 years ago, and I remember the discussion lasted hours.
It's always a good discussion. Safety is certainly one of the prominent goals of the MPO. So this is an important thing that we are hoping will get more linked into planning processes in the future.
Right. Any other discussions before I call for a vote?
The gentleman who talked about in the business world, you would look at these and they were not possible, attainable goals. If you look at this number 43.7 as the target and realize for the last, how many years, of the at least 5 different sections there, it's lower than all the sections, of course.
Right. Your target is, yes.
Yes. And I listened to him as in his point would be, if we haven't met it over 20 years, then how do you get us this low now, especially compared to the last 4 years?
I can try. It's government math. It's government math. One, if the target was set to decrease by 50%, is the goal. So it's a big ask for by 2035, is that right? 2035. 2035, half of what it was at the beginning.
So did they ask us to do 50%? That's why? Or we're asking ourselves to do?
The state asked us to do 50%.
Okay, that's what I needed to know. Thank you.
If this is Kim, if I can add one more thing to our stack here is, are there other MPOs or states that are seeing different outcomes that we might want to bring back to this conversation? For example, is speed reduction or safe design standards helping others reach their goals?
Sure. I think to your first general question, I would point out that no MPO in North Carolina is adopting their own targets at this time. To the question about other places, since this is a nationwide practice and requirement, yeah, there's been a lot of movement on safety, particularly with design standards and other things, such as speed reduction. That certainly play a part. There are other things, as Bob pointed out, enforcement is a part of the conversation. But there's, not to go down the rabbit hole, but there are a whole lot of factors that determine safety outcomes. And that is just something to keep in mind. I own a very small Honda Fit. Statistically, if I am in a crash, I am much more likely to have a serious or fatal outcome because of having a small car than others. Weather plays a big factor in a lot of these. And so that's not to say that all of this is very abstract, but there is a whole lot that goes into safety and the outcomes. Engineering is certainly a massive part of that. And that's something that I think we'll discuss more and more. But there's a whole lot that goes into the numbers that we see on the other side.
This is Bob Davey. Do we have someone that we could assign a task to go out and do some of this research and see what may have worked good for other communities and report that information back to us? At least we might be moving forward if we do something like that.
Yeah, Bob, you're taking the good news out of the announcements and news section, but the MPO was awarded a Safe Streets for All planning grant earlier this month. So that's a grant made available, a new grant made available through USDOT. We were awarded $320,000 with $80,000 in match that we are planning to get through a local nonprofit. And so we will be doing a regional Safe Streets for All plan that will hopefully be, that plans to look into a lot of those factors and also get into priority areas that we can pursue construction or implementation funding on.
I just think it would be a good idea to get as much information as we can on things that may have worked instead of, doing things based on wishful thinking.
Absolutely.
Yes. Thank you, Bob. Anybody else? Okay, hearing no further discussion, I'll entertain a motion to accept the targets.
So moved.
Fantastic. Do we have a second?
Second, Bob Davey.
Bob?
Hannah, you're on.
Asheville, Kim Roney.
Aye.
Asheville, Maggie Ullman. Black Mountain, Archie Portiller.
Aye.
Buncombe County, Amanda Edwards.
Aye.
Flat Rock, Ann Coletta.
Aye.
Fletcher, Bob Davey.
Aye.
Haywood County, Kevin Inslee.
Aye.
Henderson County, Bill Lapsley.
Aye.
Hendersonville, Jen Hensley.
Aye.
Laurel Park, George Banta.
Aye.
Madison County, Matt Wechtel.
Aye.
Maggie Valley, Mike Eveland.
Aye.
Mills River, Shannon Daunt.
Aye.
Montreat, Tom Widmer.
No.
Urban Transit, Brandon Rogers. Waynesville, Anthony Sutton.
Aye.
And Weaverville, Catherine Cordell. Aye. The ayes have it.
Aye, Ms. Linda. Thank you. Next, we'll move on to business C, draft 2024 Unified Planning Work Program, or UPWIP.
Maybe not everyone's favorite acronym, but it is an important one nonetheless. the UPWP, or the UPWIP, the draft UPWP, this is an important document that reflects the planned budget for the MPO for fiscal year 2024. To note, it's not just the MPO, it is also the City of Asheville. The City of Asheville is the region's designated recipient for FTA 5303 Metropolitan Planning Funds. So those are funds that the city receives and does metropolitan planning. There are tasks outlined in the narrative about what the city is planning to do for those funds. Also, any 5307 funds, those are urbanized transit formula funds that come to this region. If any funds are utilized for planning and oversight, that is something that's required to be reflected in the UPWP. This is the draft version. The final version is due at the end of March. Major changes between this current year and FY24. We're putting less emphasis on data modeling and travelers' behavior. That might not sound ideal, but we have put a whole lot of work into capturing some of the base year land use data for our travel demand model in FY23. That work is very cumbersome, but is about as complete as you can make it. So that is a task that we will not be needed for FY24. Sorry for the typo there. Also, we're adding more for prioritization. As noted before, P7.0, the prioritization round 7, we will be submitting projects as well as starting to get into the local input point methodology and regional impact point assignments. If that sounds like a bunch of non-English, reminder to come to the orientation on Friday, March 3rd. But that is an important part of making decisions about transportation investments in our region as well as across the state. More funding is being put towards special study administration. Hannah on our staff has done too good of a job at getting grants around the region. Besides the Safe Streets for All action plans that we discussed earlier, there's also a number of special studies funded through the MPO that are planning to move forward. More emphasis is being put on the region's MTP, or the Metropolitan Transportation Plan. That's due in 2025. We did add a staffing and compensation study. We have that preliminarily listed for $20,000 as part of our budget. To look at the amount of staff at the MPO as well as compensation levels. I think special note, the percentage of local dues has been recalculated using 2020 decennial census figures. There are some changes. Local dues have been roughly constant over the last, I think, 4 or 5 years. But as part of our memorandum of understanding, the most recent decennial census numbers are what's used to calculate local dues. So in your packet, you have the entire narrative that breaks out the different sources of funding. The first table that you see, this is largely the MPO's work tasks that we're planning to do over FY24. And also the section 5303 planning. Looks like that needs, we've got to update that. My apologies on that front. And special studies summary. That is the these are the special studies that are funded through the MPO's planning funds. And so we do have a number that are ongoing. To note, we are planning for 2 additional special studies. One is the Woodfin-Weaverville Greenway connection. as of right now, there is a funded Greenway project in Woodfin, the Woodfin Greenway, ED 5547. That is about 2 miles south of a planned Greenway in Weaverville, the Reams Creek Greenway. So we will be doing a study on how to connect those two greenways. That's also a planned part of the Hellbender Regional Trail System. So that is something we are planning on moving forward as a new study for FY24. The King Creek Greenway study, that is a greenway in the town of Fletcher that goes along King Creek between their existing greenway and the French Broad River to connect over to the French Broad River Greenway. We also have a number of ongoing studies, the 2050 socioeconomic projections. That's something that looks at how much growth is coming to the region and where it's likely to go. The Patton Avenue Corridor Study through the City of Asheville. The Reed Creek Greenway Extension Study, also with the City of Asheville, and the Ponta Flora Greenway Study with the town of Black Mountain to look at a segment of the Ponta Flora Trail through the town. As mentioned, we do have the local dues for our dues-paying members reflected at the bottom of the document. That is, there have been some changes. Buncombe County, the City of Asheville, and the City of Hendersonville saw the percentage of population in the MPO increase. Henderson County, Haywood County, the town of Waynesville, and Madison County saw their percentage decrease. And so their dues have decreased as well. Another thing hopefully one last thing to point out. The total amount of funding for the MPO is higher than it's been in the past. We are seeing a bump that may be a one-time increase in overall funds, but the total amount of local dues is unchanged. We are covering the increase with some of our carryover local dues that we've had on hand due to some of the staff turnover we've had recently. So total amount of local dues not changing for fiscal year 2024, but for some dues paying members, there are some slight increases and decreases.
Thank you. Any discussion or questions? We did. Okay.
Yes, we are looking for approval of the draft UPWP today, and we can, we'll bring that back for final adoption in March.
Any questions, concerns? Bob? I'll entertain a motion.
This is Bob Davey. I'll make a motion that we support the draft plan.
Second,
you, Bob.
Ann Coletta. Second, Ann Coletta.
Thank you, Ann. Helen?
Asheville, Kim Roney.
Aye.
Asheville, Maggie Ullman. Black Mountain, Archie Portiller.
Aye.
Buncombe County, Amanda Edwards.
Aye.
Flat Rock, Ann Coletta.
Aye.
Fletcher, Bob Davey.
Aye.
Haywood County, Kevin Ensley.
Aye.
Henderson County, Bill Lapsley.
Aye.
Hendersonville, Jen Hensley.
Aye.
Laurel Park, George Banta.
Aye.
Madison County, Matt Wexel.
Aye.
Maggie Valley, Mike Evelyn.
Aye.
Mills River, Shannon Gaunt. Long Tree, Tom Whitmer.
Aye.
Urban Transit, Brandon Rogers. Waynesville, Anthony Sutton.
Aye.
And Weaverville, Catherine Cordell.
Aye.
Ayes have it. Thank you, everyone. That concludes the business section. Now to informational. and we're gonna look at the draft 2024 to 2033 Transportation Improvement Plan, or,
this is an informational item for this month, but we do have a deadline to approve any potential project swaps for the draft 2024 through 2033 TIP by March 17th. So our next board meeting will be coming in under the wire for this item. But we do have some new slides, we have some slides for some, especially for the new members, just to kind of go through what this item really means and some of the background. In general, the CIP is the 10-year budget for construction activities around the region. It's a subset of the state's Transportation Improvement Program, or the STIP. In general, when you see the TIP come out, there's three different tiers that are focused on through prioritization: statewide mobility, regional impact, and division needs. In a typical cycle, what we see is about 8 years worth of funding that gets committed to transportation projects. That's what we've seen in the past. And there's about 2 years of non-committed funding, kind of informational, get started on studying, looking at projects on the backside of the TIP. Unfortunately, over the past few years, a lot of what we've talked about are cost increases to projects. So we've seen that non-committed funding get eaten up by those cost increases, eaten up some more. So we saw the delay of what was planned to be the 2022 to 2031 TIP and STIP. And then when all of the cost estimations were redone for projects, committed projects around the state and around the region, we found that the funding versus the estimated cost had run into quite the issue. What we talk about a lot is that, from the prioritization work group and the Board of Transportation, what was decided was to right-size the TIP and STIP, to bring it back within kind of somewhat regular budgetary windows. And so that meant picking what projects would remain committed and what projects would become uncommitted. The first step that was done was determining delivery projects, which were projects that were scheduled to begin construction in 2026 or sooner, or had already started right away, and determining to be reconsidered projects, or projects scheduled to begin construction in 2027 or later. The to be reconsidered projects were ranked based on essentially how long they've been in the TIP. So projects that were funded in earlier rounds, P3.0, P4.0, those were given more of preference than other projects. And within those rounds, they went down based on project scores for that round of prioritization. Again, a lot of the preference, as much as possible, was towards those kind of projects that were prioritized in P3.0, or essentially as far back as 2016. The third step is the flexibility option. That's where we're getting to in March. MPOs, RPOs, and DOT may consider switching out projects for other projects that did not make the cut in steps 1 and 2. So essentially, if a project made the cut and our region or local communities felt that there was another project that didn't make the cut that they'd prefer, this is where that conversation has happened. So there are some rules about how we can swap projects. Projects must be within 110% of the cost of the project being swapped out. As I've repeatedly joked at this point, we can't take out a $500,000 project and put in $1 billion project. The point is to get out of budgetary issues. And the MPO division must agree on project swaps. And project swaps, or projects may be swapped within their tier or they may cascade. So of those three funding tiers, a statewide mobility project can be funded in regional impact or division. A regional impact can be funded in regional impact or division, but it doesn't go the other way. You can't take a division needs project and put it in place for a statewide project. So kind of an easier way to think about it that we've shown you, most of you all before, is starting from scratch for this draft tip and stip. Delivery projects were added, reconsidered projects were added until the budget is expended, and now we can kind of make the choice of, if there's a project that made the cut that isn't as much of a priority as another, we can work on requesting that swap. And that's for one project, multiple projects, as long as it stays within the rules. So we've been working with our local governments in Haywood County and Buncombe County. We've been working with staff. In Henderson County, we've been working with the Henderson TAC. And so there's, in Henderson County, there were 3 projects that were discussed. I-4400BA, that is the I-26 US 64 interchange, Canoga Road, or R20 or R5748, and NC 280 Access Management Project U6124. A little bit of background on these projects. I-4400BA, the interchange, that is the project that the Henderson TAC requested be swapped back in. It initially did not make the cut, and they felt that this was a large enough priority to want to get it back in through a swap. So this is a very, very busy interchange. US 64, we'll have some data in the next month or two. US 64 is one of the most congested corridors in the region. This is a very, very important point for transportation. And we are anticipating that volumes will continue to increase at this interchange. Also to note, bike lanes and sidewalks were requested to be included as part of the US 64 cross-section. The project being requested to be swapped out is R5748. That is a modernization of Canoga Road, going from Church Street in Hendersonville down to Little River Road in Flat Rock. That is a project where there have been some significant safety issues that have been identified along the corridor. Volumes there are also likely to increase, but I would say not to an extent that I think would easily warrant a widening. But this project has received a lot of public pushback, a lot of concerns about property takings and impacts to the communities. So that is the project that the Henderson TAC requested be removed or swapped out for the interchange. The other project, 280, just to point out, adding this back in as well would go over the 110% threshold. It is a very important corridor, and I would note it overlaps with the Mills River Valley Trail, a trail project that we've looked at for about a decade. This is a project that I think we will definitely keep on the radar, but is one that will have to recompete in future rounds of prioritization. The other thing to mention is Sweeten Creek Road, U2801A. That is an important project on US 25A going from the Hendersonville Road, Airport Road intersection north to Rock Hill Road. It is a section of road that is already over capacity, and volumes are likely to increase. However, costs have also been increasing again and again. So this is currently in the draft STIP at $195 million. However, DOT recently received an updated estimate at nearly $250 million. We've been notified from the DOT programming staff that unless something is done to reduce costs, this project will be removed for the final version of the 2024 through 2033 STIP. So we've had meetings with City of Asheville and Buncombe County staff, and as well as DOT, to request that DOT look at downsizing the cross section from a 4-lane divided to a 3-lane to see if that'll reduce costs enough to keep the project in. We're anticipating getting those cost estimates back on February 28th. So hopefully they will come back and say that that's good enough to keep it in. If not, we're going to have some just quick discussions about what would be preferred for Sweeten Creek Road and if there's any swaps to consider. That is a heads up there. But for today, no action is needed. We wanted to get this in front of you all since this will be coming back in March with a deadline at March 17th. So we will definitely be bringing back the US 64 for the Canoga Road swap and Sweeten Creek Road. We will be awaiting further information. That's what we have today. Are there any questions, comments, or any further information that would be requested for part of or for this discussion?
Yeah, this is Bob Davy real quick. How is it that those of us in this group have no problems understanding the importance of the US 64 interchange or the importance of Sweeten Creek Road, but the quote professionals at DOT don't seem to see it the same way?
I am not going to speak for DOT on that, but I do think part of this process is to make clear what this group sees as priorities or lesser priorities.
Right. And you know, this idea of swapping out projects that were out and bringing them back in. I mean, I like the flexibility that we've been given, but when we do it on something like that US 64 interchange, as a group, we're losing a lot of money.
That is a good point. I think that was something that was discussed with the Henderson TAC, is that it is a $50 million project being swapped out for almost $30 million project. So there is a disparity in funds by about $20 million. I will say we had some discussions about, you know, having additional flexibility for 280 to try to get that in as well. The big issue there is that costs have not stopped increasing, and a lot of these projects are still going to be several years out. So the feedback that we've gotten is, you know, 110% of the project being swapped in, they felt was a sufficient amount of flexibility, and it's still, you know, we're still likely to see more and more cost increases moving forward.
Has anyone ever given any thought to, you know, maybe breaking some of these projects up, kind of like the way we do with greenways, where you break them up into pieces that are small enough that you can actually make some progress, and then you just keep hacking away at them, rather than making it so big that it may always be pushed to the bottom of the barrel?
Yes, there have been a number of conversations on that for a number of projects. One project in Haywood County that is now no longer funded on 2374. That's been looked at for kind of cutting that project. And we have looked at a number of other projects that we could potentially limit the scope of. Sweeten Creek has been one of potentially taking the section from Mills Gap Road north to Rockville Road and just focusing on that section. Hannah, I'll defer to you if more discussion is to come on that. That might be a strategy if we get some bad news on Sweeten Creek. But I want to say a year or so ago, we did have discussions about trying to section a number of these projects if and where that would be suitable. A great question.
Yeah, I think specifically for Sweeten Creek, segmenting the project would be option B if the reduced typical section doesn't reduce the cost enough. I believe that we already have the estimates prepared, lit up in case, you know, that becomes necessary. We already have the estimates ready to provide to the STIP unit.
Okay, that's great to know. I know there are some, I mean, the whole corridor of Sweeten Creek has a number of issues, and so obviously losing any part of it would not be ideal, but I think kind of our mantra through this whole process has been, for most of these projects, any kind of improvement that we can get is preferred to no improvement at all.
Tristan?
Tristan, I'd like to add. Go ahead, whoever that is. Ann.
Okay, going back to the I-26 US 64, do we know when the last cost estimate was done on that? Because given the way costs have gone up, it might not be such a big difference between the cost, the estimated cost of those projects to what the reality is in terms of the difference between Cayuga and the I-26 interchange. When was that cost estimate done on those projects? Do you know?
And this is Troy Wilson. It's been a little bit. We are currently updating that as we speak.
Okay, thank you.
And Bob, this is Steve Williams, addressing your point about that the 20 million is left hanging out there. The MPO and the division discussed that. Keep in mind that when we have cost overruns in construction, that comes out of our division needs budget, and it affects future projects. And we're seeing such huge cost overruns right now, we felt that it was better to leave that in there. It's not being lost. It's still in the division needs budget to cover these cost overruns so that future projects don't get pushed further out.
Well, I'm glad to hear that.
Thank you. Any other discussion before we move forward?
I will just quickly give props. This whole, I don't know, we've been working on this for 2 years, something like that. I do want to say Division 14, Division 13, you all have been fantastic. Steve, Troy, Hannah, I see you on the call, but a number of others. There have been some bumps along the way, but your guys' work has been much appreciated. Yes.
Hey, Ian, just for an update, our last official estimate was July of 21, and we're at the 2-year update, so that's why we are currently updating that estimate.
Okay, great, thank you.
This is Bob Davey. I'd like to echo on what Tristan said. I've been on council now for 18 years, and I've seen a huge change in how DOT interacts with municipalities, and it is magnitudes better than it used to be.
Thank you, Bob. We have no further discussion on that item. We'll move to the division updates. So, Division 13.
This is Hannah Cook, Division 13. I'll give the updates. I'll just wait a second. There we go. Great. So I'll start with I-26, like per usual, off the list. So work continues constructing the westbound lanes from Long Shoals Road to Bernard Road. And drivers that are heading west on I-26 over the French Broad River are now driving on that new section of the structure for about a week now. We're happy about that progress because that was probably the most significant and abrupt shift in the Buncombe County portion. So we're glad to have folks driving on the new section of the structure. Crews have already begun removing the sections of the old bridge, and they'll soon begin constructing the final phase of the 8-lane bridge over the French Broad River. Overall project is scheduled to be completed in the spring of next year. Wanted to touch on I-40 rehab between mile marker 50 and 55. that project will resume when nighttime temperatures allow for consistent work. There is still some paving operations that need to be completed before the final pavement markings and reflectors go in, but we are anticipating completion of the I-40 rehab in that section in the spring. And then lastly, I wanted to touch on Overlook Road, Hendersonville Road intersection. We get quite a few calls about that one. Work has slowed down quite a bit just due to the unfavorable winter weather conditions, but the contractor does continue to work whenever possible. They're actively pursuing construction of the curb and gutter at the intersection, again, whenever weather allows, because it is nighttime work. And they plan to renew the paving operations in March. So we've also had quite a bit of utility conflicts out there that have affected the overall completion date, but we are anticipating still a completion date of June of this year for the intersection improvements. And that's it. A lot of resurfacing will resume in Buncombe and Madison in the coming couple of months. That's all really I had for construction, unless somebody had some questions.
Any questions for Hannah? Thank you so much, Hannah, for everything that you're doing. Division 14.
I think Hannah will do her project development update.
Oh, sorry, project development. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. I was going to see if you wanted to steal the thunder this time. So we've been providing this compare of the current STIP to the draft STIP that will be adopted formally in May, as Tristan was talking about earlier. I don't know of any large schedule changes to report since last month. These are a lot of the same dates that you guys have been seeing since August of last year. And again, it's a side-by-side comparison of what's current versus what's to come with the new STIP. And anything that says not funded or funded for preliminary engineering only, those are the projects that will recompete in P7 this summer. The other ones with a date between 2024 and 2029 will be set. I say that as in they don't have to recompete. Their funding is, quote unquote, as we used to say, committed. So again, there shouldn't be anything new in there to point out. I just essentially am providing the same list that you guys have been getting since August.
Hannah, just to ask a question, Brendan Matthew is fantastic, but it looks like he's project manager for about 70% of the projects. Are there more project managers set to join the team to take some off his plate?
Yeah, so we had one project manager retire in the past 6 weeks, and the other was promoted to a different position. So we currently only have Brendan as the team lead, and then one project manager, Mike Clark. So we just have Brendan listed as a contact, but when those two positions are filled, hopefully within the next month or two, then they'll be reassigned to the new project managers. But for now, Brendan is the point of contact for all the projects that list him, unless it's a centrally managed project, then the Raleigh project manager will be listed there.
Well, prayers up for Brendan in the meantime.
Yes, I was going to say that's a one-stop shop there. Thank you. Thank you, Hannah. Division 14.
Okay, all right. So the construction side of things, those first I-40 projects are just there as a heads up that resurfacing will be continued on I-40 once the weather gets warmer. The 3 bridge projects there that you see is actually a part of 5 bridges that are being replaced on I-40. 2 are currently under construction just north of the US 276 Johnson Creek area. Harmon Den is almost complete, just a couple of things left there. Walnut Main Street in Waynesville, that project's moving forward well. Still some drainage work on the large culvert that goes underneath the roundabout. Otherwise, there's mostly bridges in Haywood County. One project I did leave off is the sidewalk project in Maggie Valley. I'll include that the next time. It's been let, but work hasn't been started on that yet. I-26 project is the same stuff that you've been seeing going on for a while as far as traffic shifts and such as lanes are completed and then traffic shifted to work on the current travel lanes. And then in Henderson County, beware of the Green River Bridge replacement that's down towards Polk County. There's still 2 lanes open in each direction. The shoulders have been closed. It's very tight squeeze through there. When they finish the work in between the 2 bridges, they'll be shifting traffic. The project that has been identified by this board on I-26 54 exit ramp is almost complete. Highland Lake Road project, this was discussed at the Hendersonville TAC yesterday as far as the delay, the very extensive delay on beginning that project. Yeah, that's about it on the construction side. And on the project development side, the reason I wanted Hannah to go first is she explained this quite well. I won't repeat everything, but basically what Hannah said goes for the Division 14 projects. And as always, keep in mind that these spreadsheets are on the French Broad River NPO website, right there on the agenda and minutes page. So anybody have any questions for me?
Steve, this is outside of the MPO, but could you provide a quick update on the roundabouts going in at 280 and 64 in Brevard?
Which one?
The one that's right there by the Pisgah National Forest.
Yeah, so that's currently right-of-way acquisition. I wish we had said something a little bit earlier. I would have found the dates. Right-of-way acquisition is currently underway there. Hang on just a second. Yeah, the reason I asked why, which ones to Tristan is there's quite a few roundabouts that are going in Transylvania County in the next several years.
Well, we drove by the other week. They're looking good. And I did want to just point out, since Steve mentioned the Maggie Valley Sidewalk project, just to note that is a locally administered project, and it is a project that is being managed by Division 14. I want to give props to Division 14. Not every division in the state provides management services for locally administered projects. So that is something that I think is absolutely critical, especially for some of our smaller communities, to access some of these federal funds. They completed the roundabout at NC 110 using locally administered project funds. That was completed 2 years ago, I believe. Now the Maggie Valley project is being led. To me, there's a lot of advantages, but the fact that it's not done across the state, I think is not ideal. But for us, just to point out, having Division 14 do it has been a great process.
And to answer Tristan's question, the roundabout series of roundabouts is actually 2 of them at US 276, US 280, and US 64 at the entrance to Pisgah Forest. It's scheduled to let in August of this year, and there is one roundabout that's under construction. If you've driven through there, that's Davison River Village Connector. Should be completed sometime this year.
Sure. Thank you. Next is the Transportation Planning Branch.
He's here.
Okay, yeah. No long updates for me. The thing that our branch is watching pretty closely right now are the urban area definition, urban area boundary updates that coming out of the census, coming out of the feds. And last week we got a schedule for what that's going to look like for the next year or two. And I think Tristan has more updates on that. So I'll save the genuflecting. Any
questions for Daniel? Hearing none. Thank you so much, Daniel. Next is Bill Marley with the FHWA FTA update.
Hello, everybody. I don't have a whole lot today. Just the grants continue to be available. I think that was mentioned earlier in the meeting, that you have a federal grant. We will pass along any further information on that. With regard to census boundaries, we hope to have some further guidance out by this summer, as far as, how to, expand your metropolitan area boundary per the new census urbanized area designations. Beyond that, there's not a whole lot more to report at the moment, unless there are any questions.
Thank you, Bill. Do we have any questions for Bill? Subcommittee work groups report.
Okay, I won't read through this line by line, but you do have your subcommittees report in your agenda packet. Our committees are staying busy. A couple things to point out at prioritization, we did talk about draft swaps, but also kind of the draft look at communities of concern as part of our environmental justice evaluation for our upcoming MPT, essentially identifying where within the census data that some of those communities of concern, low income, minority, zero vehicle households, et cetera, pop up, and what we need to consider in terms of project planning. The other I'll mention is the 5307 recipient work group. With the changes to the urbanized area, we are anticipating that there's likely going to be some changes to transit funding in the region. We'll be doing a lot of that work through that work group. That includes the transit managers for Asheville, Buncombe, Henderson, and Haywood counties. And we've been working with Haywood, especially with DOT and some researchers on the potential changes to their transit funding, which are likely to be significant due to the change in the urbanized area. Also, the Hellbender Trail, Hannah on our group is heading up a potential event in, I can't almost know it next fiscal year, later this year. I have too many calendars on my wall. And so that is going to help showcase the trail projects that are going on around our region. So if you'd like to get involved with that project, feel free to contact Hannah or Logan on our team. That should be a great event. I'll also point out, as Bill mentioned, we did receive a little bit more updated guidance from FHWA as part of the urban area boundaries and the MPO boundaries. So we did get updated dates. Essentially, from what I've been told, for the new MPOs and the MPOs that are likely to expand, I still can't see that very well. We'll put this slide up on the website. But there are expectations for the expansion of MPO boundaries to incorporate some of those new urban areas. As a reminder, the Asheville urbanized area that this MPO is based around did not really expand into areas that aren't already part of the planning area. What we saw were some significant contraction. So we'll be working with FHWA and FDA, as well as our local governments on the preferred update for that. But it's my understanding contracting and not expanding gives us a little more flexibility in terms of when we need to have that figured out. So we'll keep you updated there. We did have a little bit of talk about the Haywood County connection to the Asheville urbanized area. The number of homes that are needed to remake that connection is somewhere between 2 and 4. So we anticipate that connection happening again in the near future. We did have some staff examine that more specifically, including our GIS planner who drove the corridor and checked out a building that looked like it had apartments on the second floor. Turned out to be an office. But we'll continue working with everyone on updating that and hopefully getting a more solidified draft later this year. In terms of legislative updates, there are a couple that I would just point out for interest. One of them is House Bill 29. That is, the short title is Supporting Private Property Rights. And the big part of that is it clarifies that the inclusion of property in that overlaps with a planned transportation project that is not in a fiscally constrained plan, that does not need to be disclosed. So if there are projects that are identified in the CTP but are not funded and not getting into the MCP, that does not need to be, this bill would clarify that would not need to be disclosed in any transaction. The other one of note is Senate Bill 86. That would be an act to authorize the city of Asheville to levy a municipal quarter-cent sales and use tax for public transportation upon a vote of the majority of voters in a referendum. So that's something that I think we saw in committee a year or two ago. That is sponsored by Senator Mayfield, a former member of this board. So that's something we will keep an eye on as well. But in terms of federal updates, we do continue to get a lot of news on grants. My apologies for all the emails. I swear we are getting 2 to 3 times more and trying to send you only the ones we think you'd be most interested in. But we'll keep that information going. There is a whole lot coming out in terms of webinars and information. So hopefully that's something we can take advantage of as a region. Announcements, there's some special updates. 2 big things there. We did pass a number of letters of support, and our staff provided assistance for a number of paved trail feasibility study grants to the state. 2 of them we heard in our region have been awarded. One of them is the city of Hendersonville for their Above the Mud project. That is a planned trail project that would connect the Augusta to the Oklawaha and 7th Avenue. That's something we've worked really closely with city of Hendersonville. I will add excellent staff on that project, so very happy to get a win there. Also, the city of Asheville has been awarded a grant to look at a connection by the Swannanoa River. Right now, we have 2 roadway projects that are funded. One is on Meadow Road and one is on Swannanoa River Road. If you're familiar with those 2, connecting the multimodal facilities would require some kind of jog down Fillmore Avenue. So the feasibility study would look at making a safer, more direct connection for the multimodal facilities for those 2 planned projects. So we're happy to get those wins. We are very, very sad for some of the others that were put in, including the Mars Hill Greenway, the Canton Greenway Extension, and the Font Flora. And there's one other, Woodfin sidewalks on 251. So those are projects that we'll continue to work and try to support our local governments as best we can. Topics for next meeting. We'll talk about Project SWAP, the final UPWIP, or Unified Planning Work Program. And so those will be the big items that we'll be talking about, and we'll see what else pops up in the meantime. Fantastic. So we have to go, is there anyone for public comments? No one, unique. Multiple meetings with no public comment. Okay. That being said, we will adjourn. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.